Let me tell you something about life. When God is about to give you something big, He doesn't always announce it with applause. Most times it comes quietly, disguised as pressure, discomfort, or even loss. People think blessings fall like rain, but real elevation is preceded by signs, clear signs that separate those who are ready from those who are only wishing. Before the breakthrough comes, there is a shaking. Before the door opens, there is a test of patience, character, and faith. You will feel stretched, challenged, misunderstood, and sometimes isolated. But don't confuse the process with punishment. What feels like resistance is often preparation. If you've been wondering why things feel different, heavier, or more intense lately, pay attention, because when God is about to give you something big, your life starts sending signals. Today, we're going to uncover 7 unmistakable signs that indicate you are standing on the edge of divine elevation. Listen carefully, this might explain everything you've been going through. There is a pattern to greatness that most people never recognize because they are too busy complaining about the weight they are carrying, but weight is not always punishment. Sometimes weight is proof that you are being trusted with more. And when God is about to give you something big, the first thing that changes is the pressure around your life. Not because you are weak, but because strength is revealed under resistance. Diamonds are not formed in comfort, they are formed under pressure. And the moment you start feeling stretched beyond what used to be normal for you, that is not the time to quit. That is the time to pay attention. Because pressure is a signal. It means capacity is being enlarged. It means you are being prepared for rooms you have never entered, conversations you have never had, responsibilities you have never carried, and levels you have never seen. Most people pray for elevation but panic when the process begins. They want the crown without the weight of discipline. They want success without sacrifice. They want the promise without the pressing. But life does not work that way. Purpose is expensive, destiny has a cost, and the bill always comes before the reward. When God is about to trust you with something big, He allows pressure to expose what is inside you. Because pressure does not create character, it reveals it. It shows whether you will fold or stand, whether you will complain or commit, whether you will blame others or take responsibility. You start noticing that what used to be easy now requires focus. What used to be small now demands excellence. Distractions that once entertained you now irritate you. Because pressure has a way of refining your appetite. You no longer have time for nonsense. You no longer have energy for drama. You no longer find pleasure in staying average. And people around you might misunderstand the shift. They may say you have changed, but what they are really seeing is growth. Because growth always creates distance between who you were and who you are becoming. Pressure also comes in the form of decisions. You are forced to choose between comfort and calling, between popularity and purpose, between shortcuts and integrity. And every big thing God gives is guarded by tests that check your alignment, because blessings out of alignment become burdens, and God is too intentional to promote someone whose foundation cannot carry the weight of where they are going. So He allows pressure to train your balance, to teach you how to stand firm when everything around you is shaking. Sometimes the pressure shows up as delay, and delay is one of the most misunderstood tools of preparation. Delay does not mean denial. It means development. It means there are things that must be built in you before what is built for you arrives. Patience is not passive. Patience is strength under control. And when you learn how to wait without weakening, how to trust without seeing, how to stay disciplined without applause, you are proving that you can be trusted with more. Pressure will also expose the voices you listen to. Because when things get heavy, you discover who feeds your faith and who feeds your fear, who sharpens your vision and who drains your focus. And sometimes God allows pressure so you can finally let go of voices that were never assigned to your future. Because you cannot carry something big while holding on to something small. And every new level requires a release of the old. You may feel tired, but tired does not mean finished. It means you are working at the edge of your capacity, and capacity expands at the edge, not in the middle. That is why athletes train until it burns. That is why leaders are forged in seasons of responsibility. And that is why your current pressure is not a sign of failure. It is evidence that something in you is being stretched to make room for what is coming. Because God never places a big thing into a small container. He enlarges the container first. Pressure teaches you discipline. It teaches you consistency. It teaches you how to show up even when motivation is gone. Because motivation is emotional, but discipline is spiritual. And the higher you go, the more discipline you need, because talent may open doors, but discipline keeps you in the room. And when God is about to elevate you, He trains you to handle quiet seasons where nobody claps, nobody notices, and nobody rewards you except the growth happening inside you. You begin to realize that pressure has been shaping your vision, sharpening your focus, strengthening your resolve, and aligning your heart. And the very thing you once asked God to remove becomes the thing that prepared you to receive what you asked for. Because big blessings require big strength. Big assignments require big character. And big doors require people who know how to stand tall when the weight increases. When expectations rise, when responsibility multiplies, And when excuses are no longer allowed because something big is coming and pressure is the language, preparation speaks before manifestation arrives. And the season you are in is not meant to break you, but to build you into the kind of person who can walk into the next level with humility, courage, discipline, and unshakable faith, while carrying the weight without losing balance and standing firm. Even when the pressure keeps increasing and everything around you is testing whether you truly believe what you have been praying for and whether you are ready to receive it without falling apart. When it finally shows up, there comes a season in life when familiar faces begin to disappear. Not because you became arrogant, not because you think you are better than anyone, but because alignment has shifted. And when God is about to give you something big, He often starts by subtracting before He adds. Because not everyone who walked with you in one season is assigned to walk with you in the next. And this is one of the hardest truths to accept, because humans crave comfort. And comfort is often tied to familiarity, but purpose is never loyal to familiarity. Purpose is loyal to destiny. You start noticing that conversations feel shallow, laughter feels forced, and environments that once energized you now drain you. Not because people suddenly became bad, but because you have outgrown the frequency they operate on. Growth always creates distance, and distance is not disrespect, it is differentiation. When God begins to elevate you internally before He elevates you publicly, your spirit becomes sensitive to what no longer feeds it, and tolerance for misalignment decreases. You cannot keep pouring into cups that are cracked. You cannot keep shrinking yourself to stay accepted. And you cannot keep explaining your hunger for more to people who are satisfied with less. Sometimes old connections fade quietly, no arguments, no betrayal, no dramatic exit, just silence, just space, just less communication. And that silence can hurt because it feels like rejection. But many times it is protection, because if certain people stay too close, they would have access to versions of you that are being retired. And God is careful about who has access to your next chapter, because access is influence. And influence can either accelerate purpose or sabotage it. You begin to realize that some relationships were built on convenience, not covenant, on proximity, not purpose, on history, not destiny. And history alone is never enough to sustain the future. Loyalty without growth becomes limitation. And when God is preparing you for something big, He removes relationships that are emotionally expensive, spiritually draining, or mentally distracting, because you cannot hear clearly when there is too much noise around you. This season can feel lonely, and loneliness is often mistaken for abandonment. But solitude is different. Solitude is intentional. Isolation for clarity, strength, and focus. And God often uses solitude to recalibrate your identity, to separate your voice from the crowd, to teach you how to stand alone without falling apart, because what He is about to give you may require decisions that cannot be voted on, paths that cannot be explained, and courage that cannot be borrowed. Old connections fading is also a test of maturity, because the temptation is to chase people who are leaving, to explain yourself, to prove your worth, to negotiate your place in rooms you have already outgrown. But growth demands restraint. It demands that you let people go without bitterness, without resentment, without burning bridges. Because exits do not always mean enemies. Sometimes they simply mean expiration. And expired connections can contaminate future blessings if you keep holding on. You start valuing quality over quantity, depth over popularity, truth over validation, and this shift makes you selective, not selfish, intentional, not isolated. And God uses this pruning process to make room for divine connections. People who will not only celebrate your gift, but protect your character. People who can speak truth without jealousy, correction without control, and support without competition. What hurts the most is when the people who fade are the ones you expected to stay, the ones you prayed with, laughed with, struggled with. But expectation does not equal assignment, and shared pain does not always mean shared purpose. Some people are seasonal carriers. They help you survive, not arrive. And when survival ends, so does their assignment. This fading is not punishment, it is positioning, because what God is about to give you requires emotional stability, spiritual clarity, and mental focus, and every unnecessary connection competes for these three, draining time, energy, and vision. And God is too intentional to promote someone who is still entangled in attachments that cannot survive elevation. You begin to feel a quiet confidence rising, a peace in letting go, an understanding that growth requires release, and release requires trust. Trust that God knows who needs to exit so that the right people can enter. Trust that losing people does not mean losing value, and trust that obedience sometimes looks like walking forward while others stand still. When old connections fade, it is a sign that you are being prepared for rooms where familiarity will not save you, only substance will. Rooms where your last name does not matter, only your character. Rooms where your past struggles are irrelevant, only your present discipline. And God removes old connections, so you do not rely on old validations in new environments. So your confidence is rooted in Him and not in applause. And so when the big thing arrives, you will have the right people around you, or the strength to stand without needing approval from those who were never meant to see the full version of who you are. Becoming, as the separation continues, quietly reshaping your circle, your standards, your focus, and your capacity for what is coming next. There comes a moment when something inside you becomes louder than the noise around you. Not aggressive, not arrogant, but firm, steady, unshakable. And that is the inner conviction rising. And when God is about to give you something big, He strengthens your inner voice before He changes your outer reality. Because direction always comes before destination, and clarity always comes before manifestation. You begin to know things without being able to fully explain how you know them. Decisions feel settled before logic finishes debating. Your spirit becomes anchored even when circumstances are unstable, and this is not emotion. It is conviction. Emotion reacts. Conviction stands. Emotion fluctuates. Conviction remains. And God builds conviction so you are not moved by opinions, applause, criticism, or pressure, because what He is about to place in your hands will require certainty when everyone else is uncertain. Inner conviction sharpens your discernment. You start sensing when something is off, even if it looks right. You feel uneasy in places that once felt normal. Opportunities that excite others no longer excite you, because conviction is not about excitement, it is about alignment. And alignment often feels restrictive before it feels rewarding, because it closes doors you wanted to walk through so you can walk through the door you were meant for. You stop needing constant validation. You stop explaining every decision. You stop defending your vision to people who are committed to misunderstanding it, because conviction gives you peace without permission. It teaches you how to move without consensus, how to obey without applause, how to trust without proof. And this is critical because big blessings come with big scrutiny. And without conviction, pressure will force you to compromise. Conviction also changes how you respond to fear. Fear no longer paralyzes you. It informs you. It shows you where growth is required, where courage must be activated. And instead of running away, you lean in, because conviction reminds you that comfort is not the goal. Purpose is. And purpose demands courage, consistency, and commitment, even when the outcome is unclear. You begin to notice that your prayers change. They become less about asking and more about alignment, less about timing and more about readiness, less about escape and more about endurance, because conviction matures your faith. It teaches you how to trust God's process even when it shows no visible progress, and how to remain faithful in silence without becoming frustrated. Inner conviction also produces discipline, not the kind that is forced, but the kind that flows naturally because you understand what is at stake. You guard your time, your energy, your habits, and your focus, because conviction reveals that distraction is expensive and that every unnecessary detour delays arrival. And when God is about to elevate you, He trains you to respect the weight of what is coming. You start to feel accountable to your future self. The person you are becoming begins to influence the decisions you make today. And this creates internal order. Priorities shift, excuses lose power, and consistency becomes normal because conviction aligns your present actions with your future assignment. There will be moments when conviction isolates you, not physically but mentally. You can be in a room full of people and still feel alone because your vision no longer fits the conversation, and that isolation can be uncomfortable. But it is necessary, because leaders are often separated before they are celebrated, and clarity often feels lonely before it feels powerful. Conviction will also be tested, because anything genuine must be proven. You will face moments where compromising would be easier, faster, more rewarding in the short term. And this is where conviction becomes non-negotiable, because what God is preparing you for cannot be built on shortcuts. Integrity is not optional at higher levels. It is essential. And conviction is the guardrail that keeps you from falling when temptation appears justified. You begin to walk with a quiet authority, not loud, not boastful, but grounded, rooted, confident, because conviction stabilizes your identity. You are no longer trying to become someone. You are becoming who you already know you are called to be. And this internal certainty becomes the foundation that can carry public success without collapsing under pressure. When inner conviction becomes stronger, it is a sign that your faith is maturing, your vision is clarifying, and your spirit is being fortified for responsibility. Because before God gives you something big, He makes sure you can stand firm when opinions change, circumstances shift, and pressure increases. And that strength on the inside becomes the anchor that holds you steady as preparation deepens, and the weight of what is coming begins to rest on your shoulders, while your confidence remains anchored and your obedience remains intact. Your focus remains clear as the inner conviction continues to rise and guide every step you take forward. There is a strange season that arrives without warning, where resistance shows up even though you have done nothing wrong, where criticism increases even though your intentions are clean, and when God is about to give you something big, opposition often rises without explanation, because movement always attracts friction, and progress always provokes discomfort in those who benefit from you staying where you are. You begin to notice people questioning your motives, doubting your direction, or challenging your decisions, not with wisdom but with insecurity. And this kind of opposition is confusing because it feels unfair. But unfairness is often the evidence that you are transitioning, because when you were invisible, nobody opposed you, But the moment your potential becomes noticeable, resistance becomes inevitable. Opposition without reason is rarely about you, it is about what you represent. Your growth exposes stagnation, your discipline exposes excuses, your courage exposes fear, and instead of confronting their own limitations, some people project resistance onto you, and this resistance shows up as passive aggression, sudden criticism, sarcasm, or withdrawal of support. And if you are not grounded, this opposition can distract you from your assignment. This season tests emotional intelligence, because reacting emotionally gives opposition power it does not deserve. And when God is preparing you for something big, He teaches you how to respond with restraint, wisdom, and silence when necessary, because not every battle deserves your energy, and not every critic deserves your explanation. Some doors open only when you stop trying to defend yourself and start trusting the process. Opposition also reveals loyalty, because pressure exposes alignment. People who were clapping when you were small may become uncomfortable when you begin to grow. And this is not betrayal, it is revelation. It shows you who supported you for convenience and who supports you for purpose. And this clarity, though painful, is valuable, because you cannot carry everyone into the next level. There will be moments when opposition makes you question yourself, and this is where conviction must speak louder than criticism. Because if you depend on approval, opposition will paralyze you. But if you depend on purpose, opposition will refine you. And God allows resistance to strengthen your backbone, to teach you how to stand without constant reassurance. Because the higher the level, the fewer the affirmations. Opposition without reason is also a signal that something is shifting spiritually. Because whenever destiny moves, resistance responds, not to stop you, but to test you, to see whether you will abandon your values, dilute your vision, or compromise your integrity for peace. And these tests are not designed to break you, they are designed to qualify you. You learn how to separate feedback from distraction, wisdom from noise, correction from control, because not all criticism is constructive, and discernment becomes essential. You keep what sharpens you and discard what weakens you, and this maturity protects your momentum, because reacting to everything slows progress. This season also reveals courage, because continuing forward while being misunderstood requires strength. It requires faith that is not fueled by applause, discipline that is not dependent on recognition, and commitment that does not fluctuate with public opinion. And this kind of courage is necessary for anyone who will carry influence without losing identity. Opposition may increase, but clarity increases faster. Your vision becomes sharper, your focus becomes narrower, and your resolve becomes stronger, because you realize that opposition is temporary, but purpose is permanent. And when you stop fighting every voice and start trusting the assignment, opposition loses its grip. When God is about to give you something big, He allows opposition to rise, so you learn how to lead without being liked, how to stand without being supported, and how to move forward without being understood. Because the next level requires emotional strength, spiritual maturity, and unshakable resolve. And as resistance continues, it no longer intimidates you. It confirms that you are moving in the right direction, that something valuable is ahead, and that the very resistance you face is proof that you are no longer ordinary but transitioning into a season where responsibility increases, influence expands, and the opposition that once distracted you becomes irrelevant, as your focus locks in on what truly matters and your forward movement continues without slowing down. There is a point where everything slows down just enough to test what you truly believe. A season where results pause, progress feels invisible, and effort seems unrewarded. And when God is about to give you something big, He often allows a season of silence and waiting. Because waiting is not wasted time. Waiting is training time. And most people fail here not because they are incapable, but because they are impatient. This season feels uncomfortable because nothing external is confirming what you feel internally. Prayers seem unanswered, doors appear closed, and momentum feels stalled. But this is where faith is separated from feelings, because real faith does not need constant evidence. It needs conviction. And God uses silence to strengthen your trust. Because if you cannot trust Him in the quiet, you will struggle to honor Him in the noise. Waiting exposes your motives. You begin to ask yourself whether you want the blessing or the assignment, the reward or the responsibility, the platform or the preparation. And these questions matter because big things come with big weight, and God will not rush you into something that can crush you if you are not ready. So He slows you down to build endurance, maturity, and depth. In the waiting season, discipline becomes more important than excitement, because excitement fades when results delay. But discipline keeps you consistent when motivation disappears. And this is where habits are formed, character is refined, and foundations are strengthened. Because what is built in the dark determines how long you last in the light. You begin to realize that waiting is not passive, it requires obedience without applause, consistency without recognition, faithfulness without feedback. And this kind of obedience develops strength that shortcuts can never produce, because shortcuts bypass development, and anything gained without development will eventually demand payment you cannot afford. Waiting also forces you to confront distractions, because when movement slows, distractions get louder, doubt whispers more clearly, comparison becomes tempting, and quitting starts to sound reasonable. But this is where focus becomes a weapon. You learn how to lock in on your assignment instead of watching other people's timelines, because comparison steals joy and distorts purpose. This season trains emotional stability. You learn how to regulate disappointment, how to manage frustration, how to stay grounded when expectations are unmet. And this emotional maturity is essential, because influence without emotional control becomes destructive, and God will not give you something big if it will amplify your weaknesses instead of your strengths. Waiting also refines your prayer life. You stop praying only for outcomes and start praying for alignment, wisdom, patience, and strength, because you realize that timing matters as much as talent, and arriving early can be just as dangerous as arriving late. So you begin to trust God's timing, even when it conflicts with your urgency. You may feel forgotten, but forgotten seasons are often formation seasons, because God does his deepest work when nobody is watching, when there is no pressure to perform, no image to protect, no audience to impress. And this hidden work produces humility, gratitude, and resilience, qualities that protect success from turning into pride. Waiting teaches you how to steward small things well, because big things are built on small disciplines done consistently. And God watches how you handle what you already have before he gives you more, because faithfulness is proven in obscurity, not visibility, and responsibility is tested in the small before it is trusted in the large. There is also a spiritual strength developed in waiting, because waiting sharpens discernment. It teaches you how to hear God's voice above your own desires, how to recognize his leading without rushing ahead, and how to remain obedient even when the path is unclear. And this sensitivity becomes critical when decisions carry greater consequences. As the waiting continues, something shifts internally. Desperation turns into peace, anxiety turns into trust, frustration turns into resolve, and you realize that waiting did not weaken you, it fortified you, it built stamina, patience, wisdom, and clarity. And this internal transformation is proof that preparation is happening even if progress is not visible. When God is about to give you something big, he makes sure waiting no longer breaks you, because the blessing ahead will require patience to sustain it, wisdom to manage it, and humility to steward it. And when you finally reach the point where you can wait without complaining, trust without questioning, and remain faithful without reassurance, that is when the season begins to shift, because readiness has been established, endurance has been proven, and the silence has completed its work as your strength deepens, your focus sharpens, your faith stabilizes, and your spirit becomes capable of carrying what is coming next. There is a phase where help starts coming from directions you never planned for, where doors open that you did not knock on, where names are mentioned in rooms you have never entered, and when God is about to give you something big, he often releases unusual favor, because what he is preparing to give cannot be achieved by effort alone. It requires assistance beyond strategy, beyond planning, beyond personal strength. This kind of favor feels different because it is not forced. You are not begging, chasing, or manipulating outcomes. Things begin to align naturally. Conversations happen at the right time. Opportunities present themselves unexpectedly. And people show up with solutions before you fully explain the problem. And this is important because favor is not about luck. It is about alignment. When purpose aligns with timing, assistance is attracted. You may notice that resistance still exists, but it no longer has the final say. Delays still appear, but they do not derail you, because favor creates momentum that cannot be explained logically. And this is where humility becomes essential, because favor can tempt pride if you forget the process that prepared you, but God gives favor to reveal his hand, not to inflate ego. Unusual favor often arrives after long seasons of discipline and obscurity, because favor is not a substitute for preparation. It is a reward for readiness. And when it shows up, it confirms that unseen work was not wasted, that obedience mattered, that integrity counted, and that patience produced fruit, even when it felt like nothing was happening. This season teaches you how to receive. And receiving can be just as challenging as working, because some people are comfortable striving but uncomfortable accepting help. But favor requires surrender. It requires acknowledging that you cannot do everything alone, and that God sometimes uses people as answers to prayers you thought would be resolved differently. You also begin to see acceleration. Things that once took years begin to take months. Things that required excessive effort now require clarity and timing. And this acceleration can feel overwhelming if your identity is still tied to struggle, because struggle becomes familiar, and ease feels suspicious. But favor does not mean the absence of responsibility. It means the presence of grace. Favor also exposes your stewardship, because help without wisdom becomes waste, and opportunities without discipline become liabilities. So God watches how you manage access, how you treat people who assist you, how you remain grounded when progress speeds up, because favor can open doors, but character determines how long you stay in the room. There is also a refinement of discernment in this season, because not every open door is your door, and not every helper is assigned to stay, And favor does not remove the need for wisdom, it increases it. You learn how to distinguish between divine alignment and distraction disguised as opportunity. Because moving fast in the wrong direction can be just as damaging as moving slowly. You may notice that people who once ignored you now respect you, not because you changed who you are, but because perception often follows progress. And this can test your heart, because resentment toward the past can poison the present. But maturity allows you to accept new respect without bitterness toward old rejection. Favor also brings visibility, and visibility brings responsibility, because when more eyes are on you, your decisions carry greater impact, your words carry greater weight, and your actions set examples for others. And God does not release visibility without first shaping your values, because influence without values becomes dangerous. This season can feel surreal, because you remember praying for what is now unfolding, and gratitude becomes essential, because gratitude keeps you aware that favor is not earned, it is entrusted, and anything entrusted can be withdrawn if mishandled. So humility becomes protection, discipline becomes maintenance, and prayer becomes grounding. Unusual favor also confirms transition. It signals that preparation has met opportunity, that readiness has aligned with timing, and that movement is no longer optional, because hesitation in a season of favor can lead to stagnation, and fear can delay what grace is accelerating. So courage becomes necessary. Courage to say yes, to step forward, to take responsibility for what is being offered. As favor continues, you begin to understand that this is not the destination, it is the doorway, not the reward, but the responsibility. And this understanding keeps you focused, because you realize that the big thing God is about to give you is not just something you receive, it is something you must carry well, protect carefully, and steward wisely. And the favor you are experiencing now is evidence that preparation worked, endurance mattered, and alignment has been established as momentum builds. Assistance increases, clarity sharpens, and the path ahead begins to open in ways that confirm that what is coming is bigger than what you could have produced on your own, and that you are stepping into a season where grace, responsibility, humility, and purpose converge as the journey continues forward without slowing down.